Okay, welcome everyone. As part of our Stories for Life educational event, along with the other things we wanted to highlight, like our Sidewalk Advocacy Ministry, our post-abortive healing ministries, we also wanted to talk with you all about adoption, and adoption as a wonderful, loving option, and some of the stories of people in our community who have chosen adoption. So, with me to talk about this is longtime friend of Right to Life, supporter of Right to Life, and by long time I mean since you were a little girl, going to events with your Aunt Dottie and with your mom and dad, Janet Cameron and Mark Cameron, our very good friend, former board member, longtime supporter and dear friend, Marianne Angelillo. Welcome, Marianne.
Hi, everybody.
So,
thank you.
Well, so Marianne, I want you to sort of give us sort of the basics of how you and your husband Neil helped build your family through adoption.
We were a couple that struggled with infertility issues of unknown cause for 7 years and decided we had a lot of love to give and we wanted to have a family. So this was a very positive experience and way to build a family. There is loss, there's the loss of, everybody experiences some kind of loss in the adoption triad, which is what
Sure.
you call it. The adoptive parent or parents, the birth parents, the child, right? Everybody has loss in there. You have
Sure.
to acknowledge that loss. But there's so many benefits for everyone. And I think that's been our experience, especially with openness in adoption, which is not something that very many people are familiar with. What does that actually mean?
Right. So explain that, because I think a lot of people, when they think of adoption, they only think of it as far as closed adoptions, which
Right.
but as
And
far
secretive.
as and
Yeah.
oh, I'm giving away my baby, I'll never be able to see my
Yeah,
baby again,
right,
and because you do see fewer and fewer young women who have
Who
children
choose-
at a young age who are instead choosing to raise their children and aren't choosing adoption so much. So
Right.
maybe a good thing from this is to explain the difference between open and closed adoption,
Sure,
and that
sure.
that closed
Right.
preconception isn't the
Right.
normative way.
So I think it goes back to the 50s where getting pregnant outside of marriage was like incredibly looked down upon and shameful and hidden. Young women would be sent away to, a school, which was really like she would go away and have her baby and nobody would know.
It was a lot more social stigma.
A lot
than
of social stigma, a lot of secretiveness. Now, as single parenting and births out of wedlock have risen in acceptance, I think there's less stigma behind that. But what I think I want most to get across is that adoption is an incredibly loving choice. It's not a rejection. It's not a, I don't love you, baby, therefore I'm giving you away. Because I'm not saying that women who choose abortion are saying, I don't love you, baby, but it's very unselfish to go through an entire 9-month pregnancy and make an adoption plan for your child, which is what openness is. So openness is a spectrum.
Okay.
It is, I know I'm adopted. I know my birth parents' names, or my parents know, my adoptive parents know my birth parents' names. To openness where we are. Our experience is my eldest child visits regularly with his birth family.
Okay.
He's now 22. We have always had a very open relationship with them. His birth grandparents were a third set of grandparents for both of our children. My youngest son, we know both his birth mother and his birth father. We're less close to his extended birth family, but we're very close to his birth mom and birth dad.
Right.
With my older son, we're close to the whole family.
Sure. So it's not a situation of, and that's so good for you to have you describe that relationship, even with extended family, because I think still the conception for most people is that kind of 1950s closed adoption, like
fear. It's kind of fear,
like
right?
you have your baby, someone takes your baby away, and you'll never see your baby ever again.
Which
and that's just
would be
not
terrifying, right?
Right. And
because you love your baby and you want to know
Exactly.
what happens to your baby and you want to know, hey, like his or her life turned out really good, or
Well, I wish more people had more of a sense of what the reality of open adoption is.
Oh yeah,
because I think it would strike such a better balance.
And it's so beautiful, honestly. Like it's just like you have cousins, you have aunts, uncles. It's really just more people to love the child.
Yeah.
Adoption's about love.
Right.
It's not about abandonment.
Right.
It's not about rejection. It's about love. And that is the number one thing for the family to know. I mean, you got to think about it. Like, what a loving, unselfish choice that is.
Tell me a little bit about the sort of, I guess, the mechanisms of how you guys went through adoption. So you went through, did you go through an agency? How did that get facilitated?
So we went through an incredibly reputable adoption agency called Infant of Prague Adoption Services. It is, since then, after 50 years, I think they finally
Closed their doors.
And gave all their case files to another agency. It was a great experience because not only do they work with adoptive parents. Sometimes it's just the mother. Sometimes it's the adoptive mother and the father. They work with the birth parents, birth mother, birth father, grandparents if they need counseling or education about it. There's an entire process that the young women who were considering making an adoption plan were put through, which is like, here's what it would be like to parent your baby, to decide to parent. Here's what it would be like to make an adoption plan. And just all the different scenarios so that they could educate themselves on this really important decision they were making.
Right.
So when the young women came, or sometimes older women, like older, 30s,
whoever, yeah.
Not as old as myself,
Yeah,
but
sure.
anyway, were considering that, it was a really informed decision.
Right.
And really one made with pretty much a lot of surety,
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of people who went through that process who changed their minds.
Right.
Said, oh my gosh, I made this huge mistake.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things about it that seems, it's almost the evidence of what a good thing it is that so many accounts we get from people who've had the experience of abortion is that I have to make this choice, I have to make this choice, I have to make this choice, and not stopping to think and not stopping to talk things through. Right. And maybe you get a pamphlet or a vague word from the Planned Parenthood people about adoption, but the notion of stop, think this through, take a little time, make a plan, and to make a plan in a way that lets you know that this is something you can do.
And something you can live with.
Right.
And not going to regret. And I certainly, is there loss involved? Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Do birth moms and dads cry and say, I wish, or what if? Yeah. We have a lot of things like that in life, but it's very, I think it always comes around to, I made the best decision that I could for my child at the time.
Right.
And you
Well,
you can't wait till the child's 10 to say, oh, I want to be a parent now. A baby needs a mother or a father
right now
when it's born. Yeah.
Well, and it's loss, but it's loss with an end result of hope and a future, and as opposed to loss where which, and it's not to say that the people who go through abortion can't experience forgiveness and redemption.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there is obviously a certain finality to it.
Right.
And to emphasize to people that this is such a good option and that there are very good people out there. So the entity that we work with a lot now is Bethany Christian Services, who have wonderful people who help with counseling, with adoption planning, open adoption, all of the stuff that sort of inheriting some of that work and that great legacy of Infant of Prague. So it's anyways, so it's such an important thing. And as we sort of close, I just wanted to ask if you had any thoughts, any last thoughts about adoption, and any last thoughts about how it's enriched your lives. And,
well, of course, it's been like the greatest thing, right,
Yeah.
in my life. I got to be a mom, which is awesome, and I love my boys, and my husband loves being a dad. Our boys are 22 and 18 now. Well, one's almost 22. 21 and,
21
11,
and change.
12.
There you go.
I was just thinking to close that what are the questions people ask me the most? Like,
Yeah.
Do you love an adopted child as much as you would your own child? Well, I'll tell you what, my children are my own and we are each other's. It's not, there is no difference. There really isn't.
Right.
And it's that, and then people say, well, how can you handle when, this openness, like if their birth mom comes over, the relationship, I love these young women and
Right.
the one young man that I know, they're like, that almost like, the relationship to me is almost like your favorite sister or your favorite brother or your, an auntie or an uncle. There's no confusion. There's not confusion. Like the kids know I'm their mom and this is their birth mom, and it's very natural is all I can say. And I don't think you can know it until you're in it, but it's not as scary as you think it would be.
Well, I think a lot of people approach it with, it's the unknown, and you approach the unknown with fear.
Yeah, with fear.
And to sort of see that an example like you and your family, that no, this actually does work, and it actually works in very beautiful ways sometimes.
I have not ever known it not to work either.
Right.
I personally haven't known any other adoptive families that have had like major problems. You know? Because guess what? All teenagers are a little on the bratty side, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to throw anything they can at you.
Sure.
You're not my mom. You're not my dad. Well, you know what? Yeah, I am. Don't even, you know what I mean? Not that my perfect children have ever said anything like that to me. You know what I mean? Like your kid's going to throw at you when they want to rebel anything that they have in their arsenal.
That is fair.
So, you just don't let it.
All right. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your insight into that and explaining that difference, especially that difference between open and closed adoption, which I think is so important for people to understand. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.